In the quiet and serene landscape of California's Riverside County, a story emerged in the late 1920s that would chill the hearts of all who heard it. This was the story of the Wineville Chicken Coop Murders, a series of horrific abductions, sexual abuse, and brutal murders of young boys, which left the entire nation reeling. At the center of this terrifying tale stood Gordon Stewart Northcott, a young Canadian immigrant with a sinister agenda, aided and abetted by his mother Sarah Louise Northcott and his 11-year-old nephew, Sanford Clark. The murders took place at a chicken ranch in Wineville, California, a small, unassuming place that would forever be stained by its connection to these crimes. Gordon Stewart Northcott was born in Bladworth, Saskatchewan, in 1906, to parents who would soon take him to British Columbia. In 1924, the Northcott family made a monumental decision. They moved south to Los Angeles, California. Here, Gordon, a young and restless man, sought to create a new life. At just 19 years old, Gordon convinced his father to purchase a plot of land in a rural area of Riverside County known as Wineville. With the help of his father and his young nephew, Sanford Clark, Gordon built a chicken ranch that would serve as the cover for his unspeakable crimes. Sanford, still a boy at the time, had no idea that the trip to California would thrust him into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. Upon arriving at the ranch, Gordon wasted no time in revealing his true nature. He subjected his young nephew to physical and sexual abuse, terrorizing him for months. But it wasn't just Sanford who was to suffer. Gordon, with the aid of his mother, would go on to abduct and murder several boys. Boys whose lives would never be the same once they entered the twisted world of the Northcotts. The exact number of boys who were taken by Gordon Northcott remains a chilling mystery, while investigators would later speculate that he might have murdered as many as 20 children. Only a few names would ever be definitively linked to his gruesome acts. The story that would ultimately bring Gordon to justice began with the abduction of a young boy named Walter Collins. Walter, just 9 years old, was the son of Christine Collins, a woman who would soon be thrown into a whirlwind of grief, confusion, and tragedy. On March 10, 1928, Walter vanished without a trace. His mother, frantic with worry, searched for him, but no leads seemed to emerge. The Los Angeles Police Department, already under pressure for their lack of progress in solving the case, was desperate for answers. Months passed with no sign of Walter until a boy appeared in DeKalb, Illinois, claiming to be the missing child. Christine, desperate for a reunion, had the boy transported to Los Angeles. But when she laid eyes on the so-called Walter, she knew instantly that it was not him. The boy was a 12-year-old named Arthur Hutchins Jr., a runaway from Iowa, who had fabricated the story to gain attention and travel to Hollywood. Christine, devastated by the fraud, refused to accept the boy as her son, and in doing so, was forcibly committed to a psychiatric hospital by the police. Meanwhile, the horror at the Wineville Ranch was growing. Gordon Northcott, alongside his mother Sarah, was abducting more and more children, subjecting them to unspeakable torment before killing them. Sanford Clark, caught in the crossfire of Gordon's depravity, was too terrified to escape. He feared for his own life as well. Sanford Clark's life was irreversibly altered when he was dragged from his home in Canada and brought to Wineville. The boy, only 11 years old, found himself trapped in a nightmarish world under the control of his sadistic uncle. Gordon Northcott was a monster. He used fear, violence, and threats of death to manipulate Sanford into aiding in his horrific crimes. Over time, Sanford began to realize the true nature of his uncle's actions. He witnessed the brutal murder of boys and even took part in the disposal of their bodies, burying parts of them in shallow graves on the ranch. He later testified that the bodies of the victims were exhumed, mutilated, and burned in an effort to destroy the evidence of their crimes. At one point, Sanford was ordered by Gordon to crush the skull of a boy whose body had been burned beyond recognition. This act, of course, would haunt Sanford for the rest of his life. In August 1928, Sanford's sister Jessie, concerned for her younger sibling, visited the ranch. Upon speaking to Sanford, she learned of the horrific murders. Fearing for his life, she returned to Canada and reported what she had learned to the American consul. This led to the eventual investigation into Gordon Northcott's ranch, though it would be several months before the authorities acted on the information. In late August of 1928, United States Immigration Service agents Judson Shaw and George Scallern visited the Wineville ranch to investigate the allegations. When Gordon saw the agents approaching, he fled into the nearby woods, leaving Sanford behind to stall the agents as best he could. It wasn't until after a harrowing 2 hours of tension that Sanford finally confessed to the agents that Gordon had fled. Northcott's flight to Canada was not enough to escape the grasp of justice. On September 19, 1928, Canadian police captured Gordon and his mother Sarah near Vernon, British Columbia. By this point, the investigation had gathered enough evidence to charge them with multiple murders. But it wasn't until Sanford's brave testimony that the full scope of their crimes came to light. The investigation uncovered 3 shallow graves at the Wineville Ranch containing remains that had been dismembered and burned beyond recognition. While authorities were able to identify the remains of several boys, the complete bodies were never found. The remains that were recovered, fragments of bone and flesh, were chilling pieces of evidence that confirmed Sanford's testimony. The news of the Wineville Chicken Coop murders spread across the nation like wildfire. The town of Wineville, once a peaceful and quiet community, was now synonymous with terror. In response to the widespread media attention and the negative stigma, the town officially changed its name to Mira Loma on November 1st, 1930. However, many of the original streets and landmarks in the area still bear the name Wineville, forever reminding the world of the horrors that took place there. Clark was not tried for murder because Assistant District Attorney Loyal Kelly believed that he was innocent. Kelly said that Clark had been a victim of Northcott's death threats and sexual abuse and was not a willing participant in the crimes. Kelly instead recommended that Clark be sent to the Whittier State School, where an experimental program for delinquent youths was underway. He assured Clark that the Whittier School was unique because of its compassionate mission of genuine rehabilitation. Clark was sentenced to 5 years at the school, later renamed the Fred C. Nels Youth Correctional Facility. His sentence was later commuted to 23 months as he had impressed the trustees with his temperament, job skills, and his personal desire to live a productive life during his nearly 2 years there. Clark died in 1991 at the age of 78 and was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in 1993. Gordon Northcott's trial began in early 1929, and it would become one of the most highly publicized trials in California's history. The prosecution presented evidence that Northcott had kidnapped, molested, tortured, and murdered 3 boys: Louis and Nelson Winslow, brothers aged 12 and 10, and an unidentified Mexican boy whose dismembered body had been discovered on the ranch. On February 8, 1929, the jury convicted Gordon Northcott of these 3 murders, and 5 days later he was sentenced to death. The trial was a spectacle, with the courtroom filled with horrified spectators as the details of Northcott's crimes were laid bare. Northcott, despite his conviction, continued to deny any involvement in the murder of Walter Collins, even though his mother had confessed to the crime. Nonetheless, he was found guilty of the other murders, and on October 2nd, 1930, he was hanged at San Quentin State Prison. It was a gruesome end to a brutal reign of terror. As the trapdoor opened beneath him, Northcott's neck failed to snap, and he struggled for 13 agonizing minutes before succumbing to strangulation. It was a slow, painful death, a fitting end for a man who had caused so much suffering. Despite Gordon Northcott's execution, Christine Collins, Walter's mother, continued to search for answers about her son's fate. Although Sarah Northcott had confessed to killing Walter, Gordon Northcott never admitted to the crime. The ambiguity surrounding Walter's death drove Christine to despair, and she clung to the hope that her son was still alive. In the final moments of his life, Northcott sent a telegram to Christine, promising to tell the truth about her son's death if she came to speak with him. However, when Christine arrived, Northcott recanted his confession and refused to reveal any details. His refusal left Christine with a haunting question. Had Gordon Northcott truly killed her son, or was there still a chance that Walter might be alive? Christine Collins would never receive the closure she desperately sought. She passed away in 1964, still hoping against hope that her son would one day return. The Wineville Chicken Coop Murders remain one of the most disturbing chapters in the history of American crime. The legacy of Gordon Northcott, Sarah Louise Northcott, and Sanford Clark lives on, forever haunting the quiet streets of Mira Loma, where the memories of those lost boys continue to linger. And in the heart of the desert, the once bustling chicken ranch lies in ruin, a grim reminder of the horrors that took place there nearly a century ago. As for the community of Wineville, now known as Mira Loma, it has tried to move on from the dark history that once defined it. But for those who remember the horrors of the Wineville Chicken Coop Murders, the past will never be forgotten.